I never imagined that a simple piece of silk would unravel the comfortable monotony of my life. But there it was, lying in John's drawer, a vivid red scarf that I'd never seen before. Little did I know, it was just the beginning of a series of events that would turn my world upside down. John's invitation was as unexpected as it was puzzling. "Why don't you join us at the beach house this weekend? It'll be fun," he said, nonchalantly, as if our weekends weren't usually consumed by errands and Netflix binges. Referred to his friends, a group of men I barely knew, and fun was a concept that had been absent from our routine for too long. Still, I was intrigued. Curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed. As I packed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. John had been acting strange lately, more secretive and distracted. My suspicions were confirmed when I found that silk scarf tucked away in his drawer. Bright red and silky smooth, it definitely wasn't mine. With a mix of irritation and curiosity, I tossed it into my suitcase. I had no idea what it meant, but I was determined to find out. When we arrived at the beach house, the air was thick with the scent of salt and the sound of laughter. John's friends greeted me warmly, too warmly, if you ask me. There was Mark, whose eyes lingered a little too long, and the others whose names I promptly forgot. They were all smiles and politeness, but something felt off. Dinner that night was an exercise in forced camaraderie. The conversation was stilted, punctuated by awkward silences and John's overly enthusiastic attempts to keep things light. Then, as if scripted, he suggested we play a game of truth or dare. A collective murmur of agreement followed, and I couldn't help but feel a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. The game started innocently enough, with harmless truths and silly dares. But when it was my turn, I was dared to reveal my most hidden fantasy. My cheeks burned as I stammered out an answer, feeling the weight of their gazes. John's friends exchanged knowing glances, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the punchline of a joke I didn't understand. After dinner, the others drifted off to bed, but Mark stayed behind. He was unusually chatty, revealing that he knew about John's interests in certain adventures. His words made me uneasy, but there was something about the way he spoke, almost as if he was daring me to discover more. My mind was racing with possibilities, none of them comforting. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. As I wandered through the house, I overheard a hushed conversation between John and Mark. They were discussing plans for the next day, and my name came up more than once. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to hear more. The fragments of their conversation left me with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. Whatever they were planning involved me in ways I hadn't anticipated. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, a mix of curiosity and apprehension gnawed at me. The mysterious invitation, the silk scarf, the unsettling game, and the secretive whispers all pointed to something bigger, something I wasn't prepared for. But there was no turning back now. I was in too deep, and I needed to know what John and his friends were hiding. The morning sunlight was too cheerful for the knot of anxiety in my stomach as I made my way to the secluded spot John had mentioned. The note was brief and mysterious. Meet me by the old pier at 9 a.m. Alone, right, because nothing screams romantic surprise like dragging your wife to an isolated beach without explanation. When I arrived, the sight before me made me stop in my tracks. John and his friends were there, bustling around like they were setting up for a movie premiere. Lights, cameras, the whole 9 yards. A makeshift stage had been erected, complete with a ridiculous backdrop of faux palm trees and beach umbrellas. I felt like I'd wandered onto the set of a really bad reality TV show. John spotted me and waved, his smile a little too wide, his eyes a bit too bright. "Morning, babe," he called out, like this was the most normal thing in the world. The others greeted me with that same overly polite demeanor, but there was an undercurrent of excitement that made my skin crawl. "What's all this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as I approached. John wrapped an arm around my shoulders and led me closer to the setup. "We thought it might be fun to spice things up," he said, his tone as casual as if he were suggesting a new restaurant for dinner. "We want to film an intimate scene between us, with the guys as the audience. You know, to add some excitement to our marriage." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a surge of anger. "Are you out of your mind?" I hissed. "This is insane." John's face softened, and he put on his best puppy dog eyes. "I know it sounds crazy, but it's just for fun. We're in a rut, and I thought this might help. Plus, it's completely private, just between us and the guys. Just between us and the guys, I repeated, sarcasm dripping from my voice. How reassuring. He launched into a well-rehearsed spiel about trust, adventure, and breaking boundaries. Manipulative little weasel. Despite my anger, part of me was intrigued. Maybe it was the surreal nature of the situation, or maybe I was just tired of the same old routine. His words started to wear me down, and before I knew it, I was nodding. Fine, I said, crossing my arms. But I'm not doing anything explicit. Of course, John agreed quickly, relief flooding his face. We'll keep it simple. Simple, right. Standing there with John under the watchful eyes of his friends, I felt like a specimen under a microscope. We shared an intimate moment, nothing too revealing, just enough to make my heart race and my skin tingle with a mix of embarrassment and unexpected excitement. The guys watched intently, their expressions a mix of fascination and something else I couldn't quite place. The whole thing was awkward as hell. I felt exposed and self-conscious, but there was a strange thrill in it too. Maybe it was the forbidden nature of it all, or the way the guys seemed utterly captivated. Whatever it was messing with my head. Afterwards, John and I retreated to a quiet corner of the beach. Thank you, he said softly, taking my hands in his. I know it was a lot to ask, but it means the world to me. I looked into his eyes, searching for the man I married beneath the layers of this bizarre fantasy. Why, John, why go to these lengths? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've always fantasized about sharing these moments with others. It's something I've kept hidden for so long, and I thought, maybe it could bring us closer. His confession left me speechless. Part of me wanted to scream at him, but another part of me was starting to understand. We'd been drifting apart, stuck in a cycle of monotony. Maybe this was his twisted way of trying to reconnect. As I sat there, the waves crashing gently in the background, I began to reconsider my feelings. This was crazy, yes, but it was also something new, something that had awakened a part of me I didn't even know existed. And that scared me more than anything. Breakfast was a tense affair. The usual clinking of spoons against bowls felt like gunshots in the silence that hung over us. John, ever the instigator, decided that our little adventure needed a sequel. So, I was thinking, he started, and I braced myself. Those 4 words were never good news. Why don't we push the boundaries a bit more tonight? I almost choked on my coffee. Push the boundaries? You mean? He nodded, looking way too enthusiastic. Yeah, more explicit. It's all part of the experience, right? Experience? This wasn't a vacation package with an upgrade option. But there was something in his eyes, a mix of desperation and excitement, that made me hesitate. Against my better judgment, I found myself nodding. Fine, but we're taking it slow. The day dragged on like a countdown to an unavoidable disaster. We spent it at the beach, trying to act normal, but the tension was as thick as the humid air. Every glance exchanged, every word spoken, seemed to carry the weight of what was to come. Even the waves crashing against the shore felt like a ticking clock, reminding me of the evening's impending insanity. Back at the house, preparations began in earnest. Lights were adjusted, cameras were checked, and the living room was transformed into a makeshift set. It was like a bizarre episode of a home renovation show, but instead of fresh paint, we were adding a layer of voyeuristic thrill. Then came the costumes, or rather, the lack thereof. A selection of revealing outfits was laid out for me, each one more daring than the last. As I sifted through them, a strange mix of emotions washed over me. Part of me felt objectified, like a prop in this twisted game. But another part, a deeper, darker part, felt a rush of power. All eyes were on me, and in this surreal scenario, I had control. Choosing a particularly provocative number, I slipped into the role they seemed to expect of me. The second session began, and this time, there was no pretense of subtlety. John and I performed, our actions more explicit, the boundaries pushed further than I had imagined. His friends watched with rapt attention, occasionally offering directions, their gazes hot and unrelenting. Just when I thought I had a handle on the situation, Mark stepped in. Literally, he joined us, blurring the lines of our carefully constructed arrangement. His touch was electric, a jolt that sent shockwaves through my body. It was shocking, yes, but also undeniably thrilling. The audacity of it, the sheer taboo, ignited something within me. When it was finally over, the air was thick with unspoken tension. John's friends congratulated us, their words hollow and surreal. I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and guilt, like I was balancing on the edge of a knife. Their compliments were a stark reminder of the line we had crossed, and the deeper into this we went, the harder it would be to return to normalcy. As the night drew to a close, I found myself alone, grappling with the whirlwind of emotions. The exhilaration of the evening clashed with the guilt that gnawed at me. I had never imagined myself in such a scenario, yet here I was, teetering on the edge of something dark and uncharted. Lying in bed, my thoughts spiraled. Was this truly what I wanted? Or was I merely swept up in John's twisted fantasies? The lines were blurred, the boundaries pushed, and I was left wondering where this path would lead us. One thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days were a blur of increasingly bold and bizarre sessions. John and his friends seemed to shed any remaining inhibitions, diving headfirst into the depths of this peculiar arrangement. Each friend took a more active role, turning our intimate moments into a spectacle of shared fantasies. And me? I was caught in the middle of it all, swept along by the current of their desires. It was during one of these surreal evenings that Mark dropped a bombshell. We were alone for a moment, the air still buzzing with the aftermath of another intense session. "I have to tell you something," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I've developed feelings for you." Great, just what I needed. A confession of love in the midst of our living soap opera. His words hung in the air, heavy and awkward. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. On one hand, it was flattering. On the other, it was a ticking time bomb. Sure enough, it didn't take long for the bomb to explode. John found out. How? I'm not sure, but his confrontation with Mark was inevitable. The argument that followed was a spectacle all its own, a clash of egos and hidden resentments. They didn't just argue about me. They dug up old wounds, revealing the cracks in their friendship and their mutual fascination with this twisted game. As if things couldn't get more complicated, enter Lisa, John's ex-girlfriend. She arrived unannounced, like a hurricane in a designer dress, with an agenda all her own. The tension in the house skyrocketed. John and his friends were on edge, and I was left wondering what fresh hell had just walked through the door. Lisa wasted no time getting involved. She inserted herself into the sessions with a finesse that made my head spin. It was clear she knew how to play this game, and she played it well. Her presence added a new layer of complexity, stirring jealousy and competition within the group. I couldn't help but feel a mix of irritation and begrudging admiration for her audacity. The dynamics shifted again, and I found myself torn in new ways. My loyalty to John was strained by my curiosity about Mark and this unexpected connection with Lisa. Each day felt like walking a tightrope, and I was constantly on the verge of losing my balance. Then, late one night, Lisa cornered me in the kitchen. "We need to talk," she said, her eyes glinting with a conspiratorial light. "I have a proposition for you." She laid out her plan with a confidence that was both intimidating and alluring. Lisa proposed that we form a secret alliance, using the men's desires to our advantage. "They think they're in control, but we can turn the tables," she said, her smile wicked. Imagine the power we could have. It was a tantalizing idea, one that played to my growing sense of empowerment and my desire to regain some control over the chaos. But it was also risky. Trusting Lisa felt like making a deal with the devil, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to go that far. As I lay in bed that night, the weight of the day's events pressed down on me. The sessions, the confessions, the confrontations, and now this secret alliance, it was all too much. My mind raced with possibilities and fears, caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Could I really trust Lisa? Could we pull off such a scheme without everything blowing up in our faces? And most importantly, what did I truly want out of all this? One thing was certain. The unraveling had begun, and there was no turning back. The path ahead was fraught with challenges and mysteries, and I had to navigate it with caution and cunning. The game had changed, and so had I. Lisa and I didn't waste any time. We began to subtly take control of the sessions, setting our own rules and boundaries. It was a calculated risk, but surprisingly, the men accepted it without much resistance. Maybe they were too caught up in their own fantasies to notice the shift, or maybe they just didn't care as long as the show went on. Either way, we found ourselves holding the reins, and it felt damn good. The new dynamic was like a breath of fresh air. John and his friends became more submissive, eager to please us rather than the other way around. I felt a newfound sense of power that was both exhilarating and liberating. For the first time, I wasn't just a participant in their twisted game. I was calling the shots. Lisa and I explored our own desires, pushing boundaries in ways that surprised even us. There was a freedom in our new roles that I hadn't expected. We were no longer just playing along, we were rewriting the rules. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was enjoying every minute of it. But of course, nothing good ever lasts. Mark's jealousy started to rear its ugly head. He didn't like the attention I was giving to Lisa, and it showed. His possessiveness created a palpable tension within the group, making every session a ticking time bomb. And like any good drama, it was only a matter of time before things exploded. The explosion came in the form of a secret tryst. One night, when the others were asleep, Mark and I found ourselves alone. The air was charged with unspoken words and lingering glances. Before I knew it, we were tangled together in a whirlwind of passion and confusion. It was reckless and wrong, but it felt undeniably right. The tryst complicated everything. My feelings for Mark were no longer just a curiosity, they were real, and they were strong. I couldn't ignore the pull he had on me, even as it threatened to unravel the fragile balance we'd established. And it didn't take long for John to notice. John's suspicion grew with each passing day. The arguments between him and Mark became more frequent, their once solid friendship crumbling under the weight of jealousy and betrayal. I was caught in the middle, torn between my loyalty to John and my undeniable connection with Mark. The rift between them widened, and I felt the ground beneath me start to crack. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Lisa dropped a bombshell of her own. She revealed that she had been filming everything. Every session, every intimate moment, all captured for her own project. The outrage and betrayal that followed were almost tangible, hanging in the air like a dark cloud. John was livid, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. His friends were no better, their trust shattered by Lisa's revelation. As for me, I was left reeling. The power shift that had once felt so liberating now felt like a trap, closing in on all sides. The house was in chaos, and I couldn't help but feel like I was at the center of the storm. Everything we had built, every twisted fantasy we had indulged in, was falling apart. The delicate balance of power and control had been shattered, and I was left to pick up the pieces. As I lay in bed that night, my mind racing, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the end. The end of our bizarre adventure, the end of my marriage, the end of whatever twisted connection I had with Mark. One thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. And maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. The revelation hit us like a sledgehammer. Lisa's smug confession that she'd been recording our every move turned the beach house into a war zone. The confrontation was immediate and explosive. John's face went from red to white to a shade of green I'd never seen before, while his friends erupted in outrage. "How could you?" John shouted, his voice cracking with betrayal. "You've crossed the line, Lisa." Lisa, unfazed, simply shrugged. "You all wanted excitement. I just gave it a little twist." The room erupted into chaos. Accusations flew, and alliances were tested. It was like being trapped in a bad reality show, except there were no cameras. Well, no visible ones, anyway. Everyone turned on Lisa, but the damage was done. Trust had been shattered, and there was no going back. In the midst of the chaos, John turned to me, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and desperation. "You need to choose," he said, his voice trembling. "It's either them or our marriage." An ultimatum. Great. As if things weren't complicated enough. I felt like I was being torn in two. My connection with Mark was real and deep, but my marriage with John was something I wasn't ready to give up on, at least not yet. Torn, I knew I had to make a decision. A painful one. "I'll end it," I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the shouting. "With both of them." John's relief was palpable, but the look on Mark's face broke my heart. Betrayal and heartbreak were etched into his features as he stormed out of the house. "I'll never forgive either of you," he spat, slamming the door behind him. His departure left a void, and I knew things would never be the same. And then there was Lisa. Feeling scorned and backed into a corner, she threatened to release the footage unless we compensated her. Panic set in. The thought of our private moments becoming public was too much to bear. John and I had to act fast. We tried to negotiate with Lisa, but she was unyielding, her demands steep and unreasonable. It felt like we were trying to tame a wild animal. The situation was spiraling out of control, and we needed help. In a surprising turn, John's friends stepped up. Despite their own feelings of betrayal, they offered to help manage the fallout. Their support was unexpected but appreciated. Together, we worked out a plan to keep the footage private and mitigate the damage. We met with Lisa one last time, our group united in purpose. The negotiations were tense, each word carefully chosen. In the end, we reached an agreement, one that involved a hefty payment and Lisa's promise to disappear from our lives for good. It wasn't perfect, but it was the best we could hope for. As the dust settled, I looked around at the remnants of our chaotic adventure. The house, once filled with excitement and taboo thrills, now felt hollow and tainted. John and I were left to pick up the pieces of our shattered trust and try to rebuild something resembling a marriage. Lying in bed that night, I couldn't help but reflect on the madness of it all. The secrets, the betrayals, the shifting power dynamics, it was a whirlwind that left me feeling both exhilarated and exhausted. But amidst the chaos, I found a strange sense of clarity. We had faced the fallout together, and though our relationship was battered, it wasn't broken. There was still a chance to salvage what we had, to rebuild on the foundation of honesty and trust. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a challenge I was willing to accept. And as I drifted off to sleep, the events of the past few weeks played out in my mind, a reminder of how far we'd come and how much further we still had to go. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what we needed. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. We were back at the beach house, the same place where all the madness had begun. This time, it wasn't about desire or control, it was about damage control. Lisa sat across from us, looking like a cat that had swallowed the canary. Her confidence was infuriating, but we needed to stay calm. John opened the negotiation with a straightforward offer. Here's the deal, Lisa. You get a significant financial compensation, and in return, you delete all the footage and leave us alone for good. Lisa smirked, leaning back in her chair. How significant? We named a figure that made my stomach churn. It was a lot of money, more than I was comfortable with, but it was the price we had to pay for peace. After a long, tense silence, Lisa finally nodded. Deal. The relief was palpable, but it was tinged with a bitter aftertaste. We'd bought our way out of one problem, but there were still so many more to face. Lisa left, her departure marked by a cold goodbye. Good riddance, I thought, but I knew it wasn't that simple. With Lisa out of the picture, John and I had to face the reality of our situation. The trust between us was in tatters, and we had a lot of work to do to rebuild it. We started with small steps, open and honest conversations about our desires and boundaries. It was awkward at first, but slowly, we began to understand each other better. We need new rules, John said one night as we lay in bed, the darkness making it easier to be honest. If we're going to explore anything in the future, it has to be private. Just between us. I agreed. No more games with friends, no more outsiders. We needed to focus on us, on healing the wounds we'd inflicted on each other. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. To make a fresh start, we decided to move to a new city. Leaving the beach house and all its memories behind was bittersweet, but it was the right decision. Our new home was a chance to rebuild, to create a life that wasn't overshadowed by past mistakes. But even as we settled into our new life, I couldn't shake my lingering feelings for Mark. The connection we'd shared was real, and it haunted me. Despite my best efforts, I found myself sending him secret emails and messages, seeking closure that never seemed to come. Then, one day, Mark showed up at our doorstep. The sight of him took my breath away. He demanded answers, closure, something to make sense of the chaos we'd created. John was furious, and the confrontation that followed was inevitable. "What the hell are you doing here?" John shouted, his face a mask of rage. "I need closure," Mark said, his voice steady but filled with pain. "And I think she does too." The argument that ensued was intense, filled with accusations and raw emotions. But amidst the shouting, something shifted. The old passions that had driven us to this point flared up again, confusing and complicating everything. I found myself torn once more between John and Mark. The feelings I had for both men were real, and the choice I faced was excruciating. But deep down, I knew what I had to do. It was time to make a final decision. "I choose John," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "I'm committed to our marriage and our new life together." Mark's face fell, but he nodded, understanding that it was time to let go. He left, and this time, it felt final. John and I stood together, the weight of the past finally starting to lift. It wasn't going to be easy, but we were ready to face the future, together. Our new beginning was just that, a beginning. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we were stronger for the journey we'd taken. As I looked at John, I felt a sense of hope. We had come through the fire, and though we were scarred, we were also forged stronger. Our story wasn't over, it was just starting a new chapter. And this time, we were writing it together. Despite my decision to stay with John, the tension between us was as thick as ever. Trust, once broken, isn't easily mended, and we were still walking on eggshells around each other. Every conversation felt like it could veer into dangerous territory, and the unspoken resentments lingered like a bad smell. We decided to tackle the problem head-on by starting couples therapy. It wasn't an easy decision. There's something about airing your dirty laundry to a stranger that's both mortifying and liberating. Our therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Reed, didn't pull any punches. "If you're going to make this work, you need to confront your past actions and be brutally honest with each other," she said during our first session. And so, the sessions began. We talked about everything, our desires, our boundaries, and all the ways we'd hurt each other. It was uncomfortable and painful, but slowly, we began to peel back the layers of hurt and start rebuilding our relationship. It was like cleaning out a wound, painful but necessary for healing. To help with the healing process, we decided to embark on new adventures together. This time, we set clear boundaries and ensured everything was based on mutual consent. We took cooking classes, went on hiking trips, and even tried our hand at ballroom dancing. These new experiences brought us closer, allowing us to rediscover the joy of simply being together. Surprisingly, John's friends re-entered our lives. They approached us with a surprising amount of support and understanding. It seemed that our shared experiences had created a bond, and they were eager to help us move forward. We formed a new, healthier dynamic, one based on honesty and mutual respect. Then came the unexpected news. I was pregnant. The discovery hit me like a ton of bricks. Suddenly, our priorities shifted. We were no longer just trying to fix our marriage. We were preparing to bring a new life into the world. The pregnancy added a new dimension to our relationship, forcing us to reevaluate everything. Preparing for the baby's arrival became our focus. We painted the nursery, bought tiny clothes, and took parenting classes. The anticipation of becoming parents brought us closer, giving us a common goal to work towards. The excitement of the baby's arrival overshadowed our past troubles, at least for a while. But new challenges awaited us. Parenthood, we quickly learned, was not for the faint of heart. Sleepless nights, endless diapers, and the constant worry were overwhelming. Yet, despite the exhaustion, we faced these challenges together, stronger for the experiences we'd shared. Our baby became the glue that held us together, giving us a reason to keep fighting for our marriage. Just when I thought we'd seen it all, I stumbled upon John's secret project, a manuscript. He had been writing a book about our experiences, hoping it would help other couples navigate their own struggles. At first, I was furious. How could he keep this from me? But as I read through the pages, I realized it was his way of making sense of everything we'd been through. The book deal came through, and suddenly, we were thrust into the spotlight. Our story, once private, became public. With fame came scrutiny, and we faced public judgment and media attention. Some people admired our honesty and resilience, while others criticized our choices. The scrutiny tested our resolve and unity, but we stood firm. Through it all, we learned that our past didn't define us, it was our actions moving forward that mattered. Our relationship, once fractured, had been reforged in the fires of adversity. We emerged stronger, more united, and ready to face whatever challenges life threw our way. As I looked at our baby sleeping peacefully, I felt a sense of contentment. We had navigated the storm and come out the other side. Our story was far from over, but we were writing it together, one chapter at a time. And this time, we were ready for anything. The day our book hit the shelves, our lives changed forever. The media frenzy was immediate and intense. Our story, once confined to the walls of our beach house and our hearts, was now a public spectacle. Cameras, interviews, and headlines became our new normal. Some people praised us for our honesty and resilience, while others crucified us for our choices. It was like living in a fishbowl, with everyone watching and waiting for us to screw up. Support came from unexpected places. People reached out to us, sharing their own stories of struggle and redemption. They saw us as brave, even inspiring. But then there were the critics. Oh, the critics. They called us immoral, attention-seeking, and worse. Navigating this sea of mixed reactions was exhausting, and more than once I found myself questioning if we'd made a colossal mistake by going public. Despite the chaos, John and I decided to embrace our new reality. We started giving public talks and interviews, sharing our journey and the lessons we've learned. Standing in front of crowds, bearing my soul, was terrifying at first. But it also became cathartic. Each story we shared, each person we touched, made the whole ordeal feel worthwhile. With the attention came new opportunities. One of the most bizarre offers was for a reality TV show. Can you imagine? Our lives, already so public, being broadcast even further. We considered it carefully, weighing the pros and cons. Ultimately, we decided against it. Our story was out there, but we needed some semblance of privacy to survive. Balancing our public life with our private relationship was like walking a tightrope. The demands of interviews, book signings, and public appearances were relentless. But amidst it all, we made a pact to stay true to ourselves. Date nights, quiet moments with our baby, and genuine conversations became our anchors. Without them, we would have been lost. Then, in a twist of fate I didn't see coming, Lisa reappeared. This time, she wasn't the villain of our story. She offered her support and proposed a new project, a documentary about our journey. Her perspective had changed, and she wanted to help us tell our story in a way that could genuinely help others. Surprising, right? But people can change, and we decided to trust her, cautiously. Rebuilding friendships with those we'd hurt was another challenge. It was a slow process, but we managed to create a new, more honest network of support. The wounds were still there, but they were healing, and we all learned to forgive and move forward. As our child grew, new parenting challenges emerged. Sleepless nights turned into tantrums and school runs. But we faced them together, stronger for the experiences we'd shared. Parenting was a whole new adventure, one that demanded patience, love, and a lot of humor. We navigated it with as much grace as we could muster, knowing that our past had shaped us into better parents. One evening, as we watched our child play, John and I reflected on our journey. We realized the legacy we were leaving, one of resilience, honesty, and the power of second chances. Our story had impacted others, and that was something to be proud of. With everything behind us, we looked forward to a fresh start. Stronger and more united than ever, we were ready to face whatever came next. Our story wasn't over, it was just beginning a new chapter. And this time, we were writing it together, ready for anything the future had in store.